Ellensburg is a mysterious area located in western Washington. What sets it apart is a well-like structure, the origin of which remains unknown. No one knows who built it or how it was formed, but one thing is certain: this is no ordinary well. Like the previous owners of the land, Mel and other farmers used this well to dispose of large trash items. Over the years, things like blown-out tires, broken tools, and old belongings were thrown into it, never to be seen again. But after all this time, Mel started to suspect that something about this well wasn't quite right. Because despite years of dumping countless pieces of trash into it, the well never filled up. In fact, not only was there no sign of the garbage, it was impossible to see the bottom at all. Over time, Mel started to notice strange things that had never caught his attention before. For example, his dogs were always uneasy near the well and refused to go near it. Even more bizarre, radios and communication devices would experience heavy interference whenever they were brought close to the well. But what truly escalated the situation was when Mel's neighbor threw one of his deceased dogs into the well. From that day on, the lives of everyone in the area changed forever. Mels Well was a circular structure with a diameter of 3 meters. Surrounding it was a stone-built outer wall that extended about 5 meters deep. But beyond that, nothing could be seen due to the overwhelming darkness. As I mentioned earlier, both Mel Waters and his neighbor had been dumping all kinds of trash into the well for years. Yet no one knew how long it had existed. Strangely, no sound was ever heard when objects were thrown in. No impact, no splash. Even more unsettling, if you shouted into the well, there was no echo. These events only fueled Mel's curiosity even more. Determined to measure the depth of the well, he headed to a local hunting supply store and purchased a long fishing line. Attaching a 1 kilogram weight to the end, he slowly lowered it into the well. However, even after reaching the end of the line, Mel still hadn't found the bottom. By the way, don't think the fishing line was just 50 or 60 meters long. It was a full 1,400 meters. Yet even after all that, it still hadn't touched the bottom. Mel, thinking the line had simply gone into the water, which is why he couldn't find the bottom, decided to attach sponges to the weight. He lowered it into the well once more. However, when the line reached its end, there was no water. The sponges came back up dry. Mel's curiosity had reached its peak. He bought several more fishing reels and tied them together, creating a line that stretched a full 20 kilometers. He lowered it down, but it never reached the bottom. While conducting this experiment, Mel noticed that his dogs refused to approach the well at all. Even when he tried to force them to come closer, the animals resisted with all their strength. It wasn't just the dogs. There were no birds, no insects, not a single living creature near the well. Mel explains the situation to his neighbors, and they too confirm that their dogs have never gone anywhere near the well. But then one of the neighbors tells a story that terrifies everyone. The neighbor explains that a few weeks ago, one of his dogs died and he threw the body into the well. However, just a few days later, he claims to have seen the same dog alive at the entrance of his farm. A few days had passed since Mel's neighbor threw his dead dog into the well. Yes, it was a truly awful thing to do, but now Mel sees the dog running by itself at the entrance to the farm. He instantly recognizes it. The dog is even still wearing its collar. However, something is off. No matter how much Mel calls it, the dog ignores him completely. It wanders the woods as if it doesn't know him at all. Both this event and the fact that Mel's fishing lines had never reached the bottom of the well led him to seek help. In 1997, he contacted a radio show that dealt with topics like this. The show had over 10 million listeners worldwide. On February 21, 1997, Mel sent a message to the show about his experience. He received an immediate response. His story quickly became a case, followed by millions. Every day, Mel continued to share details about his small well experiments through the show. At the same time, curious listeners kept offering him various suggestions. However, after a few days of sharing information back and forth, things suddenly take a serious turn. When Mel Waters heads to his property, he finds the area is closed off. The people who have arrived are no longer the curious listeners of his story. They are, in fact, the U.S. military, and they want one thing: ownership of the mysterious well.
After the show on Friday night, I went out there and noticed there were some helicopter activity around the property. There was further helicopter activity the next day. And so I figured that clearly somebody out there listens to your program.
Oh, yes.
One of the details Mel shared on the radio was that, despite no living creatures being around the well, plant life continued to grow rapidly and densely. Additionally, when a radio was brought near the well, there would initially be static interference. However, after making a few adjustments, Mel started to receive some signals. According to Mel, one of the strange signals he received was from a radio station that played very old songs. This wasn't a nostalgic station playing retro hits. He was actually picking up signals from a channel that seemed to belong to the past. Mel continued to search through the channels and stumbled upon a baseball game broadcast. However, this wasn't a game from 1997. It was a broadcast of a game that had been played 30 years ago. Mel was in communication with Artvin in Edinburgh, and when he returned to his property after the broadcast, he found the military had surrounded the area with heavy weaponry. The authorities tell Mel that a military cargo plane had crashed on his property, and that's why the area has been closed off. However, there's no wreckage or smoke to be found. Not believing them, Mel protests and insists on speaking with an official. A civilian official soon arrives and informs Mel that the land no longer belongs to him. Furthermore, they openly threaten Mel, saying that if he causes trouble, they can easily find evidence of illegal substance production on his property. When Mel insists that he will go to the press with the story, the official remains unfazed and simply tells him, "Go wherever you want. No one will believe you." Mel returns to the only audience that will believe him, the Coast to Coast AM radio show, and shares everything he has experienced. But this time, it's not just about the military takeover. One of his neighbors contacts him and claims to have seen a pitch-black beam of light rising from the well and into the clouds. On the radio, Mel clarifies that he didn't personally witness the event, but his neighbor insists that it happened. Meanwhile, listeners begin to share their own theories about the well. Some claim that the area is a known hotspot for UFO activity. Others suggest that the well might be located on a ley line, a pathway of mystical energy, which could mean that it functions as a time portal. They believe this could explain why anything thrown into it seems to vanish. An elderly neighbor even recalls that many years ago, there were stone pillars surrounding the well, but over time, they collapsed and disappeared. After sharing all this information, Mel announces that he will try to uncover what really happened to his land and will return with new details in the next broadcast. However, when the next scheduled program arrives, Mel is nowhere to be found. Even worse, no one can reach him. No one knows what happened to Mel until 3 years later, when he suddenly calls into the show again. He reveals something shocking. A group of people offered him $3 million per year in exchange for his land. But it wasn't just about the money. The deal was to remain completely secret. According to the agreement, Mel had to leave the country, never return, and never speak about the incident again. Fearing what might happen if he refused, Mel accepts the deal and spends 2 years living in Australia. However, as time passes, he begins to miss his family. Unable to stay away any longer, he secretly arranges a trip back to the US, breaking the terms of his agreement. Finally, as Mel heads to the studio, the bus he's traveling on is stopped by police officers. All the passengers are questioned and taken off the bus, placed onto different ones. Mel, however, is knocked unconscious and secretly taken away. 12 days pass. During this time, Mel finds himself hundreds of miles away, lying on a side street in San Francisco. His wallet and keys have been taken. Feeling pain in his arm, Mel rolls up his shirt sleeve and discovers needle marks from an IV drip. It's not just that. He tastes blood in his mouth as his molars have been removed. Slowly starting to recover from the shock, Mel learns that the government has filed dozens of lawsuits against him. Illegal road construction, building projects, and energy usage are among the charges he faces. In reality, none of this is Mel's fault. All of these actions were carried out by the people who leased his land. But since the government broke the agreement, all of this was placed on Mel's shoulders. To make matters worse, all his money in the bank has been wiped out. When Mel shares all of this on the Coast to Coast program, people no longer believe him, and they think he's a fraud. However, the host of the show is a seasoned professional. Having spent years discerning the difference between truth and fake stories, he believes Mel's account. The host of the program sends his team to the address Mel provided. There is no well to be found, but there are marks left on the ground from heavy machinery and military equipment.
Maybe my audience is not aware, but a television crew went up to Ellensburg after we did the last program and researched this. And I'll be doggone, they didn't find the hole, but they did find near the area where you were talking about a lot of military boot prints and all kinds of information that would indicate the military, in fact, had been there or was there.
Oh, they would have probably seen a lot of yellow gear tread marks in the ground.
Yep.
Additionally, the area's airspace has been oddly declared a no-fly zone. But that's not all. Before Google Earth, the satellite imaging system, Terra's server, began showing the land completely blacked out. Some skeptics, who believe Mel's story is made up, claim that Mel chose the area because it was blacked out by Terra's server and then invented his story. However, the Terra's server program was activated almost a year after Mel's first phone call. Amid all this debate, Mel connects to the program again and says that a tribe living in the Nevada region has reached out to him. According to Mel, the tribe invited him to conduct research in their region. This is because they have also found a mysterious bottomless well in their area.
They took you to it.
They took me there. I did not go all the way up to the hole, but there was conversations between the Native Americans and the Basque and blah blah blah, and they basically agreed that everything was as it should be. That I wasn't from CNN or the FBI or the CIA or whatever.
Right.
And so I went there and I got to see the hole. Now,
all right. What's there?
In the place Mel went to, there was a significant Basque population. The Basques are a small ethnic group that migrated from an area between France and Spain to America. This group has been raising livestock in Nevada since the 1800s. According to their story, this second group has been there ever since they arrived. The local people and the Basques classified the area around the well as sacred. Like Mel's well, this well also has a 3-meter diameter opening, but unlike the other well, it has metal framing alongside stone walls and metal rods leading into the depths of the well. Interestingly, even the slightest vibration on these metals is not felt. Mel and the locals begin conducting experiments on their own. They lower a basket filled with ice into the well. Although the ice around them has melted due to the heat, the ice lowered into the well remains unchanged. With one difference, the ice is no longer ice. It has transformed into a structure resembling a petrified salt crystal. The team throws this strange formation into the fire, but instead of melting, the original ice structure catches fire, and even more strangely, continues to burn for months without the flames ever going out. The experiments with ice continue. In 2 out of every 3 trials, the ice melts normally, but in 1, the ice transforms into this strange crystal structure. In the end, curiosity overpowers the warrior, and he becomes eager, saying, "Lower me into the well." However, the team refuses this request as they believe it is too dangerous. Instead, they decide to lower something else into the hole, a sheep. Unfortunately, the rest of the story will not end well for the sheep. As the sheep is lowered into the well, it starts to become more and more agitated. The team begins to lower the cage containing the sheep down the well. With the animal's movements causing the cage to swing, it suddenly calms down when the depth reaches 330 meters. The only sound that can be heard is a faint hum. The team holds the cage in place for 30 minutes, then pulls the sheep back up. The cage and sheep appear completely normal, but the sheep doesn't move. Realizing the animal is dead, the Basques place it on the table for an autopsy, and the situation begins to resemble something straight out of a movie scene. According to his account, he experienced a divine encounter, and his life changed completely. Mel states that everything that happened was recorded. For this, the program host invites Mel to the studio, along with all the evidence, and they agree. After that, Mel disappears completely. Isn't it an interesting and equally fantastical event? Wells that resemble portals, the government's attempt to cover it up, and much more. So, how real is this event? One of the most famous mysteries from the Coast to Coast program? What kind of evidence do we have? Let's take a closer look. First, let's take a look at Mels Well. The Terrace server really did darken the region. But years later, when Google Earth was released, the area became clearly visible. In the following years, dozens of people scanned the area to find the well. But to no avail, no one found anything. Now, since the military and the government got involved, many people believe that the well has been sealed. It's actually a logical assumption. Curious individuals, while scanning via satellite, noticed this interesting formation, a structure resembling a sealed well next to an old cabin. Those who believe this is the well go to the area and take these pictures. Mel had mentioned on the program that there was indeed a cabin next to the well, and right next to the cabin, this is found. A well with a stone wall about 3 meters in diameter, surrounded by a fence of wires. Of course, people immediately rushed to the site. But guess what? This well is not our well. It's an old water well with a bottom. Many people on the internet claim to have found the well in different places, but this has never happened. The well was never found. Now let's talk about Mel. He is quite a complex subject. There is no record of anyone by this name living in the area. Not only that, but despite being asked for photos multiple times, there are no photos related to the incident. Mel constantly claims that the machines broke down near the well, which is why no photos could be taken. This, however, strengthens the claims of the skeptics. But if we look at it from the other side, if Mel were a scammer, the story had become so popular that he could have made serious money by writing a book, selling merchandise, or just by appearing on shows. But he didn't. As you've probably noticed, the story kept getting more and more interesting. None of it has any proof. And in the end, when the cycle of events spiraled out of control, Mel disappeared. For 5 whole years, millions of people eagerly listened. But this is where the mystery of the well ends. Personally, I think it's a completely fabricated urban legend. The guy deserves credit, though. He kept the story going for 5 years and made millions of people curious. Don't let them deceive you with stories like this. Always look for solid evidence when listening to this kind of content. Stay tuned to our channel. Goodbye.